Ladies and gentlemen, good morning for this last day. It's a pity it's already the last day. And what have I to say? Everybody has spoken so much about things I have in my mind, so that I might be just repeat what you have heard. I'll talk about categories. Some things are obvious, hidden, secret. Something are purely geometric, and we don't know, is there an aesthetic in it or not. Let's try. So we have a field of 4 parts. A naive viewer, an expert viewer, the artist himself, and algorithms. And they look both and generate computer-generated art, and the aesthetic of it is somehow a matter of taste, but also a matter of cultural background. So you see, all those 3 humans, they have a cultural background to look at this. So the expert viewer, of course, for him it's a matter of pre-knowledge, what he knows of algorithms, what he knows. Maybe he knows the person who made the computer-generated art. And then he understands much more. So I will show some examples. No, this was the wrong way. The naive viewer. He has no idea about the idea, he just looks at the object. He looks at the object and he receives object aesthetics only. So some examples. There is a picture of something. If you don't know what it is, you don't even know, is it an object in 3D? Is it a photo of an object? Is it generated just as an image in the computer? The same is with the next picture. Carl Blossfeld. Is it a spline curve which looks nice? The other one there, Gerd Beer. You see the Pythagorean numbers 3, 4, and 5. The Pythagorean theorem, of course. This cannot be the only thing in this picture. A naive person would look at the figure down. It looks very symmetrically. But I will show it is not. And it shows more or less typically Japanese coloring also. Then N.C. Escher, Maurits Cornelius Escher, everybody knows he made it by hand. And now we can do the same stuff by computers. And the next figure, Lazar Domnikovic, he made this figure maybe by hand, maybe by computer. We will see. Here, what do you think about this figure? Is it computer-made? Is it handmade? Is it a photo?
I think it's a painting.
No, it's a 3-dimensional object, very nicely enlightened, and then photographed. This is the same. So it's made in Berlin, a photographer in 1928, a time where you didn't have computers, of course. But I show now a figure generated by computer, scanned and generated by algorithms. Next. Here, one of our colleagues would look at this figure very joyfully, because the Pythagoras is not the only thing you see in it. It's lots of golden sections too. The other one, on the right-hand side of my colleague here, it's just the angle at the circumference. There's nothing hiding. It's obvious. It's just obvious. But the underlying structure is to take some lines and distort it by a certain function. That's it. Or this one. This is close to what Kalantari Bachmann does. Very close. You have a real plane. You take the function xy function, and then say you make a model 11, for example, like this. And if you color each layer a little bit different, so you have here 3 colors only. So you take, for example, 2, 3, 4 all together to give the color red, 5, 6, 7, and so on. The color green and blue and so on. And you get a figure. And also this is somehow, if you look at the image, you could guess the original function. It's a matter of art, and you can see modulo 11, this is a secret idea, but explained. Here comes hidden geometric idea. So, Hirotaka Edisui is a very strange man. You notice that Hirotaka Edisui, AHI 382. That's the name, the number of the theorem he sent me within 2 years. He just discovers figures and sends them to me and says, I found a new theorem, please enjoy. That's what I get. And it's not symmetrical, with any x or y axis. You see that the rectangle is at the top rectangle is a square, and down it's not, and the proportions of the rectangles on the left and right hand side are also different. And there are many concurrences of circles and so on, and different layers of it. Here another part, 378, 2 types of pentangles with lots of secret and strange concurrences of circles and points. Now this, by hand or not by hand? Of course, Escher's is made by hand. Now you can transform it. But is this, when you transform an idea, another one has originally, is this art? It's aesthetic. Yes, it is. The thing I did is to turn around what's not the usual way, to turn around the Poincaré, the Poincaré model down, such that infinity up matches the infinity down. So one can think of, is it possible that infinity can roll on infinity? No, it cannot, of course not, because the two models don't have nothing to do with each other. They are just inverse. No, I have to press here. So this man on armchair, this is sort of erotic art in geometry, and there are many of them. You should believe me. And this is, yes, I don't want to talk a bit more about it. So, the next person is the expert viewer. He can sometimes guess the idea behind the idea. So, maybe he guesses the wrong idea. This is also possible. And he doesn't know, is the thing computer generated or hand drawn or painted and so on. And is it art? A thing we discussed already now. For example, this. The object on the left-hand side, on the left-hand side up, you might guess, it has to do with fractals. Okay, this is an idea. It has to do with fractals on spheres. Have you ever heard of fractals on spheres? Maybe not. Anyway, the next figure, you might guess that there are, it has to do with golden sections. It is the logo of our institute in Dresden. It has to do with golden sections. We'll talk about this later on. The right-hand side figure up looks very beautiful, but it aims at inform you about something. It has not primarily the aim to be beautiful, to be aesthetic, but it has an inherent aesthetic. Down the figure, is it computer drawn or is it hand drawn? It's also drawn by hand of a colleague of mine. I will talk about this also later. And the figure in the middle shows you a hypercube in, let's say, I don't know, in an 8-dimensional space, mapped into, projected into a 3-dimensional space. And the figure on the right-hand side down is, yeah, what is it? It's an art object. It's brass. That's it. What's the idea behind? It's the minimal fabrication of the torus with two handles by triangles, a triangulation of such a surface. So, a fractal geometric idea, obvious, hidden, or secret. What is behind? So I call it the blue planet. So our figure. So you start with 6 points, and the right-hand side figure is the points are numbered. And you choose any 3 points, and the remaining 3 points form a triangle which is in perspective position with the first one. In any cases, for any 30 possibilities, you have this. And here you have the existence of many golden sections, and you see that the golden section is a projective geometric property, not only a property in affine space. So it's a nice figure with which I could give a lecture which lasts at least 4 hours in one set. So I talked about this minimally triangulated torus. It's a 3D model, a very nice one, and the idea behind it was not generated by computer. It's a mathematical idea. And the other one, I call it bad bicycle on bad road. You can have 2 wheels which are not very convenient on usual roads, but on this wave-formed road, yeah, they are very convenient to move you on a great circuit on the sphere. This is Stephen Hawking's, and a book I would recommend everybody to read, The Universe in a Nutshell. And here he illustrates, the intention is to bring the incredible and unimaginable things of space and physics close to the reader. It was radiosity of the space. Here you have multidimensional cube, 3D mapped. And this is what we also have heard yesterday, a map of the hypercube in the Euclidean 4-dimensional space to 3D and then to 2D and so on. So you get the so-called zonotopes, and you can form them such that they are objects with a very great aesthetic approach to us. Now we can talk about the artist himself. He's a mathematician. I will call him a geometer rather than a mathematician. He has the idea. He has an idea and programs maybe algorithms. But he also uses algorithms which are inside such a machine in a computer, painting programs, CAD programs. He don't reflect anymore. He just uses them as a usual painter didn't make the colors himself. And former times he did, but now he buys it. And so it's the same stage. So, from the idea, it comes to an abstraction. This abstraction is more or less a mathematical idea. So, it is performed in form of algorithms. And then comes out an object. I just want to point it out and pull your attraction to Robert Ricks. I think he's a very great mathematical artist. He deals with zigzag lines, which he calls canine or bovine loop structures. You see them in the middle figure. He develops a zigzag with cut sharp edge. Then this is a bovine structure. And if you have the sharp edges, he calls them canine structures. And then he smoothes them out and forms them to objects. And he also makes these objects by hand. But the idea is clearly mathematically, and also, I think, it could be done in the same way. So, there's always an interaction between the first try of the algorithms back to the artist. He chooses colors, he chooses parameters. And the interaction of this artist and the result, the spontaneous result of the computer, gives the final result at the end when the artist is content with what he produced. So, some examples. Robert Wicks again, hier wird eine Episode, hat Losfeld, again Jung with something, and Stephen Hawkins again with an illustration which is pedagogically perfect to my opinion. And myself. I start with myself this time. What is the idea? The idea is everybody knows about fractals, and many of us teach about fractals, and we call them self-similar objects. Self-similarity is the key of our approach to fractals. But you live on the sphere. You don't have similarities. You don't have affinities. You just have congruences. But you can make fractals on the sphere too. So our approach to fractals, didactically seen, is not a very good one because it doesn't comprise everything. So you can, of course, a very good model for the complex numbers, and we talked about this. They are a one-dimensional set, the complex numbers. And you close them by one point. Of course, you make the projective closure of one line. So you end up with a model which we call the Riemannian sphere. The Riemannian sphere. In some American books, they are called complex sphere. I don't like this concept. Anyway, you can have multiple sets on this object. This is nothing new. You can have things, mosaics and fractals on the sphere, and you can have piano curves, Hilbert curves on a globe, which means that you can, with one single curve, you can reach every point on the sphere. These are not, it's not a real Hilbert curve, it's just a pre-Hilbert curve of some stages, of course. Here again, Robert Wicks. Robert Wicks, here in the middle figure, in the upper figure, you see that bovine and canine structure with the sharp edges and the mild broken edges. And the final results in wood. Unitari and his school, he uses computer to generate paper folding, origami. And I think this is also art where you use the computer to produce the right folding patterns to get, for example, even a horse or a rhino or whatever you want. And this is the aesthetics of the Japanese coming through these figures. For example, this is also paper folding and design by computer algorithms. These two. And I think it's a highly aesthetic object, but to my opinion, typical for the Japanese culture. Also this, very beautiful. And you have the pattern to fold down there. It's, to me, a new way, not only to fold boats and hats in paper folding, but beautiful objects. Again, this of your lace, the blue planet, and a part of the blue planet. You see, you can play with colors, you can play with parts of the object. This is also a part of the spherical object. It's a 3D object, but it's really a 3D object. It's photographed. It's not only produced as a shadow there. And the Möbius might, you see, it's a Möbius transform of a spiral. And of Daniel Lordig, helical waves, this object is based on an idea. Of course, you don't have splashing in these waves and drops and the bubbles, but it's very, very aesthetically, to my opinion. And it just consists of helices osculating each other in one point. And these are all these helices. So we can come to the algorithms and design tools. This is the part inside a machine and inside mathematics where you don't really ask, does it work, does it not work? You just know it will work. And you hope that numerically everything is stable, and if not, you just change some parameters. So what can you see here? Here, it's on the left-hand side, upper, it's the folding pattern for this facet. And on the right-hand side, you see a didactically visualization of something in the book of Stephen Hawkins. And down here, you have an ornament. And in the middle, you have graphics. You have simple graphics with the intention to inform somebody. The intention is to give an information about something, let's say a function or a process. The process here is repeated inversion. And on the right-hand side down, you have again a shape. Here, for example, Victor Vasarely, a Hungarian artist, he plays also with 3 dimensions. Of course, this object could be made and should be made by computers. It's easy. He made it by hand, and it's flat, just like a table. And it looks 3-dimensional, and it plays with the upper view and the view from downside. Here you have the pattern folded from the left-hand side edges, paper folding structures. And here you have the sonotopes of Laszlo Veres. And the generation of it. Of course, this is done by computer. You can even follow the steps of it. And then with some transparency and lightning, you can make beautiful objects, and coloring also. Karl Blossfeld, he looks at natural objects, photographs them, and they look at as if they would be artificial. This is also Daniel Lordig and his student Nestler. Constructivism was done in between the wars in Russia of Chernikov. He made lots of constructive sketches. And the aim was to reproduce a 3D object from this. So the secret algorithm is to reconstruct the 3D object and represent it in the computer as a 3D object, and map it again in a way such that it looks like Chernikov's images. And this is the result. Another result of Daniel Lordig is you can transform a usual object via a collineation to make the relief of it. And you can look at this church now backstage from the backside or from inside on the right-hand side, the photo. Next one is you can use another transformation. You can transform an object you have by a, let's say, spatial inversion. You get new objects. Of course, new objects. Is this art? It has an appeal of aesthetics. Yes, it has. And it looks like that the building, the Maxentius Basilica, is, to my opinion, very hard to digest. it's a way to digest it. Next, algorithms. The very essential algorithms can be found in mosaics, for example, in mosaics, friezes, and wallpaper ornaments. This is visualized group theory. And then you go up to the sphere, and you see, the usual penroll styling on the plane, the penroll styling on the plane, is not at all a regular tiling. But on the sphere it is regular. And now arises the question, are there irregular, non-periodic tilings on the sphere? Do they exist? I don't know. I tried to find out, but I didn't succeed until now. Here again, it's always the icosahedral symmetry group behind these mosaics. Another form of polyhedra are put in to each other, forming a mosaic on the sphere. Again, what we already know, that's the original figure in your slates. And if you turn around, you can let infinity meet infinity. So this is Stephen Hawkins. He wanted to show you relative simultaneousness in this picture. And I think it's didactically very nice. And computer graphics makes, if you have one object, generated one object, you can repeat it. It's that difficult. Once again, Japanese mathematical aesthetics of Hirotaka Ibisui. Again, these new wave in paper folding, and visualized algorithmic aesthetics drawn by hand or drawn by computer. What I want to point out here is the mathematical idea is independent. The mathematical idea must be independent of the tools. So it should be possible to make it by hand, and it should be possible to perform it with, let's say, by computer. So you have here a figure again, harmony and inversion of the type where you saw the man on the armchair. And on the right-hand side, architecture. It's a very, very beautiful figure in a book on descriptive geometry. And I think descriptive geometry should flourish up again, because it's a mean to depict the four-dimensional, at least the four-dimensional space into three or two-dimensional spaces, and handles these objects and can reconstruct them. So, again, one picture of Fritz Hohenberg's book. Is this hand-drawn or computer-drawn?
1956.
So it's so it's clear it's not. But you see, to get a computer to make such a beautiful drawing, it's rather a hard job. You hide this impossibility to make such a beautiful black and white drawing in colors. And this is what I think computer art is about, colors, because it's not possible to make such beautiful drawings. So, once again, I talked about these four aspects of approaching to, let's say, computer-generated art, but I'm not sure always whether a thing is computer-made or not. So, how should I end? Of course, with thanks to the organizers. There's only one organizer here. Oh. Oh. But many, many thanks for your kindness to provide us with all these nice, happy feelings.
Thank you very much.
So, the next thing is I have also to thank the great artists who provided me with the material I could show. And of course, I thank you for your patience. And I want to show you also an object, finally, is this nature, computer-made, handmade. You go for nature. You are quite right. It's wood. It's a wooden thing. So maybe the snails would call the person who made this a praxiteles in their language, but they don't speak. So I can give it around if you want to show. It's handmade, by the way. And by the way, myself. So thank you very much again.
Questions? Questions for Gunter?
Gunter, your very first slide, quite interesting definition of mathematics and art and so on. Do you feel if you looked at your first slide and removed mathematics with, let's say, some other topic, that it would still carry through?
Yes, in some sense, it would do. It would do. But this is visual art. I mean, I aim more or less only to visual art. If you talk about music, maybe you would come to very similar approaches, but then I should have a radio or sing a little more.
So are paintings brush-generated art?
Yes. If you paint by hand, this direct, yes, of course. It's an algorithm to dip in your brush and paint. Dip in, paint. Dip in, paint. Seurat made pointillism is in the sense handmade computer drawing, a computer algorithm. But I might not be right. You see, I don't want to
Now I asked the
tell
question
about
because I
dogmas.
really dislike the term computer-generated art. Because nobody talks about brush-generated art. They talk about...
Yeah, because it's more or less direct. It's more direct if you paint by hand than if you just go into the computer and let it make something and you don't know the result. And when you get the result, change parameters. This is the difference. You're just expecting, you're sitting there. It's like throwing colors to the wall and sitting there and waiting what happens.
Like Jackson Pollock, you mean?
Yes. Yes.
You don't call it art.
Yeah. But I'm cautious.
Well, now,
I'm cautious. I don't want to talk about dogmas.
I think that's a perfectly valid question. Because the way I think about it is what an artist does is a kind of choreography and of course polish. So it fits into that framework. But in terms of what I do as a sculptor, it's a kind of choreography. It's a dance, really. And so we don't say, well, dance is an algorithm, it's good. We don't usually formalize it quite that way.
No. In my abstract, I made a literature parabola out of it. The algorithm is like the genes of a human being, let's say. And for biologists, it should be enough to know about the genes. But as we humans are, we just like to look at Marilyn Monroe, the final object. We need it. The algorithm alone is not Yes.
The algorithm is what got her here.
Is there a kind of ranking you do when you're talking about the naive viewer, the artist, and the expert viewer? Or do you think that all these three kind of viewers are necessary to talk about or to...
No. It's always the same. If you know about a thing, if you are a biologist, you would notice much more than a usual person who just picks up the flowers and comes home with them. And the same is with music. If you are well trained to listen and to analyze music, you get much more out of it. You get the hidden aesthetics in addition. So you just walk by if you don't know about things. So knowledge, pre-knowledge, is essential in all our contacts with art and ourselves too. If you are too naive, you don't get the point.
I wouldn't say that you don't get the point. Maybe you're not conscious, but it's the same. Maybe, but I wouldn't say that a trained musician can get more information out of music than a naive listener. It's just another way to approach, I think. And maybe it's not a less conscious way.
But why do modern musicians have so many troubles to find people to listen to them?
Because they are in the sky, they're not touching the people.
That's
my
it.
opinion.
That's the problem with 20th century art in general, is they left beauty out, they put beauty aside in an effort to explore the rational implications. And so they left the heart and the soul and the body behind, which is a very valid way of inquiry. But that is what happened in the 20th century, is art became cerebral. And if you don't appreciate that journey, you're left behind. You're left standing in front of a giant red square saying, you know, my 3-year-old daughter can do this. And you miss what Rothko had in mind for us.
Exactly.
Because you don't get the message.
Yeah.
I will also say there's a couple lovely lines from a poem. One is a line that says, Brodsky is the poet who says, I wish I knew no astronomy when stars appear. And the poem ends, I wish it was still a quarter to dial your number. It's just a gorgeous poem. And in it is this line, I wish I knew no astronomy when stars appear. The other thing, Walt Whitman, this lovely poem, when I heard the learned astronomer, I grew tired and I wandered out under the stars. You know, this is really, I think, what we feel when we look at this intersection of math and art. That's so often something that is so integral to make the artwork being explored gets left way behind. You know, but there's no reason to view it as an either-or situation. It's the scale. It's a gradation.
Thank you very much. You said it in so beautiful words.
Well, Walt Whitman said it, so.
Yeah, but you remember.
There's another aspect of this, which is the modern mathematician is just as misunderstood by society as the modern composer might be. But there still is this incredible aesthetic in our work. It's just that the only language with which we can express that language, that aesthetic, is the language of mathematics. And as much as we try to teach that language, we fall short of it. So that's probably a bigger problem with pedagogy or with societal influences than anything else.
Anyone?
I think there's an issue of scale here that you brought up, and you said, why can't we get people to listen, you know, modern composers to listen to? And I think that's not the case. I think modern composers are listened to, probably by more people than listen to, you know, the great dead white males musicians of the past. We have a huge population. And when we think population of the time. And there are many, many people, who write exotic music, say, who have listeners as large as, Mozart had, but they don't have, 100,000 people in a stadium. So it's a question of scale in terms of this perception. I mean, my sculptural work is supported by a relatively narrow sector of, the technical and scientific world, which I appreciate, and it allows me to survive in doing what I'm doing. But it's not.
But they have persons
We're
with
not
pre-knowledge.
talking about millions of people, and you really don't want to compare it on that scale.
No, but these persons, they have the pre-knowledge to understand what you are doing, or feel what you are doing.
Someone was very helpful in developing my infrastructure.
I'm not sure that scale point is right, actually. I think there were about 20,000 people at Beethoven's funeral, and I think that you could count on the fingers of one hand the number of Milton Babbitt or Stockhausen albums that have sold more than 10,000 copies. So I think even in absolute numbers, you might find that a famous European composer in 1800 had a larger absolute audience than a celebrated modernist composer. My own personal view as a musician is that modernist composition, you guys are all giving it too easy a time here by taking modernist composers' words, or taking their word for it, that what they're doing is grounded in a kind of rationality the way this mathematical art is. I think when you dig into the details of a lot of the supposedly mathematical music of the 20th century, it comes apart like a wet piece of tissue in your fingers. So, as a musician, I take a much more skeptical approach to someone who tells me they've got fractals in their music than I do when someone shows me a piece of visual art and tells me it has fractal structure, because in my sort of limited sample size, the visual artists are doing a much better job of embodying mathematics in their art.
I just wanted to weigh in on the other side of understanding as being a more aesthetic thing. For example, that there's another one of those egg-shaped pictures that's actually the microwave background radiation. And if you just look at the picture of it, there's something aesthetic that draws you in and asks you, what is that? But if someone next to you can explain to you what it is, and you start thinking about the origin of the universe and how this radiation is still around and this picture can show you, and you start having this whole aesthetic, I think extremely aesthetic journey that starts to, you're looking at the colors, but you're also thinking about all these other things. Now, I mean, maybe this is a philosophical question and not really appropriate for this, but just as something to think about aesthetics. This is, to me, the most aesthetic.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I think we're adhering to what has gone before, and that is we're slipping on our time scale.